August 2nd, 216 BC. A flat, sun-scorched plain near Cannae in southeastern Italy. The ground is already hot. Dust rises from Roman feet, 100,000 of them, pressing forward like a fist closing around its enemy. The consuls Varro and Paulus have positioned the largest army Rome has ever assembled with crushing confidence. The plan is simple, brutal, Roman. Push forward, overwhelm the center, destroy Hannibal Barca by sheer weight of numbers. What they don't know, what no Roman soldier can imagine, is that they are already inside the trap. Across the plain, Hannibal surveys his line, 30 years old, fighting Rome since childhood, schooled in its destruction by his own father. He has crossed the Alps in winter with war elephants. He has crossed rivers under fire. He has bent every Roman instinct, their aggression, their pride, their faith in numbers, into weapons that will be used against them. His center is deliberately weak. His African veterans wait on the flanks, hidden. When Rome pushes forward, and it will, because that is what Rome does, the center will bend like a crescent moon, the Romans will pour in, and then the flanks will close. What follows will not be a battle. It will be a slaughter so complete that 23 centuries later, military academies still teach it as the perfect encirclement. 50,000 Romans will die before noon. But Cannae is not the beginning, and it is not the end. The question that haunts every serious historian is this: why didn't Hannibal march on Rome after Cannae? Because if he had, the city that would define Western civilization might have ceased to exist entirely. This is the story of the Punic Wars. 3 wars, more than a century, 2 civilizations so powerful, so incompatible, that only one could survive. The Mediterranean was not a border, it was a highway. Whoever controlled its trade routes controlled the ancient world's economy: grain, silver, timber, slaves. And at the center of that network sat 2 cities maintaining an uneasy, profitable coexistence. Rome had spent 2 centuries unifying the Italian peninsula through conquest, alliance, and an unusual willingness to absorb former enemies. A republic of formidable discipline, almost unlimited manpower, and a constitutional structure that could absorb punishment that would shatter any other state. Carthage was something different. Founded by Phoenician settlers on the northern coast of modern Tunisia, it had become the ancient world's greatest commercial empire. Its navy was unmatched, its treasury was vast. It built power not through assimilation, but through trade, mercenary armies, and a merchant aristocracy whose organizing principle was profit. Both cities were expanding. Both needed the same thing: Sicily. Sicily was the agricultural heart of the Western Mediterranean. By 264 BC, Roman and Carthaginian influence were pressing toward each other across that island like tectonic plates, until the pressure had nowhere left to go. The spark was almost absurdly small. Italian mercenaries called the Mamertines, having seized the Sicilian city of Messana, appealed to both powers simultaneously for protection. Carthage responded first. The Mamertines then appealed to Rome anyway. The Senate debated. Rome's merchant class pushed for the economic opportunity, and Rome stepped in. Neither side wanted total war. Neither knew they were lighting a fuse that would burn for over a century. The First Punic War lasted 23 years. Rome, a land power with no naval tradition, built an entire fleet from scratch, reverse engineering a captured Carthaginian warship, and building 100 copies in 60 days. They invented the corvus, a boarding bridge that turned sea battle into the kind of close infantry fight Rome excelled at. Crude, brilliant, it worked. But 23 years ground both sides down. A Roman force even landed in North Africa, nearly reached Carthage's walls, before being annihilated by the Spartan mercenaries Xanthippus in a defeat that haunted Roman commanders for generations. In the end, Rome won, not through genius, through endurance, through the Senate's refusal to stop. Carthage sued for peace in 241 BC, surrendering Sicily, paying an enormous indemnity, conceding Roman dominance of the northern Mediterranean shore. But the war had created something Rome didn't fully understand yet. A generation of Carthaginian officers who had absorbed 23 years of humiliation has personal wounds that would not heal. One of those officers had a young son who had watched everything. His name was Hannibal. The case can be made, and serious military historians have made it, that Hannibal Barca was the most tactically gifted battlefield commander who ever lived. He was born around 247 BC into Carthage's most powerful military family. His father Hamilcar, the general who had kept Rome stalemated in Sicily for years, never accepted the defeat. He spent the rest of his life building Carthage's power in Spain, a project simultaneously economic, military, and deeply vengeful. The story goes that young Hannibal begged to come on campaign. Hamilcar agreed on one condition. The boy had to swear eternal enmity toward Rome at the altar of the gods. Hannibal swore it. He kept it until the day he died. Hamilcar died in Spain in 228 BC. Command passed to his son-in-law Hasdrubal the Fair, then by assassination to Hannibal in 221 BC. He was 26 years old. What distinguished Hannibal was not just courage. It was his understanding that battles are won inside the minds of men before they are won on the ground. He grasped Roman psychology with surgical precision, their aggression, their compulsion to push forward, to close and destroy, and saw it not as strength but as a lever. Predict that the enemy will attack a specific point with overwhelming force, then arrange your geometry so that attack becomes self-defeating. That insight was the engine behind every major victory he achieved. His flaws were equally significant. Hannibal was a poor strategist in the largest sense. He could win battles with supernatural consistency but never developed a coherent theory of how tactical victory translated into political victory over Rome. He operated in a magnificent tactical vacuum, destroying armies, proving Rome could be beaten, but never connecting that proof to a mechanism that would actually end Rome as a power. Part of this was structural. Carthage's merchant aristocracy resented the Barcid family and withheld the reinforcements Hannibal's campaigns demanded. He fought on a logistical shoestring throughout, and he was, in key moments, emotionally rather than strategically driven. The oath to his father was a personal commitment, not a cold geopolitical calculation. His Roman counterpart in the war's crucial later phase possessed something Hannibal lacked: institutional patience. Quintus Fabius Maximus, appointed dictator after a catastrophic Roman defeat in 217 BC, responded to Hannibal by refusing to fight. He shadowed the Carthaginian army, cut off foraging parties, ambushed supply lines, denied every decisive engagement. His soldiers called him cuncatator, the delayer, as an insult. He wore it as a badge. Fabius understood that Rome's power was not in any single army, it was in its system. Wear out the system and it regenerated. Hannibal could defeat Roman armies indefinitely and still not defeat Rome if Rome refused to stake everything on one battle. The Senate overruled him, raised the largest army in Roman history, sent it to Cannae. The general who would eventually win the war combined Fabius's strategic patience with something entirely his own. Publius Cornelius Scipio, 25 years old, no major command experience, given the job because Rome was running out of options, had studied Hannibal the way a man studies the thing that destroyed his world. His father and uncle had both been killed fighting Carthaginian forces in Spain. His study was clinical, not emotional. He dissected the principles behind Hannibal's genius and applied them in ways that were aggressively, distinctly Roman. The confrontation between these two men was coming, not in Italy, not in Spain, in Africa, on Carthage's doorstep. But first, the world had to be set on fire. The Second Punic War began not with a declaration, but with a siege. Sagunto, a lie on Spain's eastern coast, fell to Hannibal in 219 BC after 8 months. Rome demanded his extradition. Carthage refused. War was declared. Hannibal's response was the most audacious strategic gambit in his history of warfare. He would not defend Spain. He would invade Italy itself, not by sea where Rome now dominated, but over land, through Spain, through southern Gaul, through the Alps, into Italy's northern heartland. The Alps in 219 BC were not a route. They were an absolute barrier. No army had ever crossed them into Italy. The passes were held by hostile Celtic tribes. Late autumn conditions were already lethal. Hannibal moved 40,000 infantry, 8,000 cavalry, and nearly 40 war elephants through the most hostile terrain in the world on fraying supply lines. He set out with 40,000 men. He arrived with 26,000. The Alps killed the rest. Avalanches, ambushes, cold, altitude, starvation. Most of the elephants died within months of reaching Heli. But he arrived, and that alone, so far outside Roman calculations, functioned as a psychological weapon before a single battle was fought. His theory was elegant and ultimately flawed. He needed Rome's Italian allies to defect. If he could destroy Roman armies repeatedly, visibly, the alliance outwork would fracture. Cities would abandon Rome. Stripped of its manpower base, Rome would negotiate. It required Rome's allies to prioritize autonomy over long-term survival, and it required Hannibal to keep winning spectacularly. He delivered.
At the Trebia River, December 21 BC, he lured a Roman army of 40,000 across a freezing river at dawn, hit both flanks simultaneously, and watched it collapse. Over 30,000 Roman casualties. At Lake Trasimene, April 217 BC, he concealed his entire army in Forest hills above a narrow lakeside road, waited for the Roman column to enter the corridor in morning fog, then descended from 3 sides at once. The battle lasted less than 3 hours. 15,000 Romans died. The consul Flaminius was killed. 6,000 more were captured. The largest ambush in history. Rome was in shock. Fabius was appointed. His strategy infuriated the public. When his term expired, the Senate elected Varro and Paulus and gave them history's largest Roman army. The trap at Cannae was the result. August 2nd, 216 BC, we return to Cannae. Hannibal's 50,000 face nearly double their number. His cavalry is superior, his infantry is outnumbered. Conventional logic says find terrain that negates Rome's numbers. Instead, he chooses the flattest ground available. His weakest troops, Gallic and Spanish infantry, form a convex bulge in the center toward the Roman lines. His African veterans wait on the flanks, almost perpendicular to the main line. Cavalry split, heavy Iberian and Gallic horse on the left, Numidian light cavalry on the right. Varro packs the Roman infantry into a dense, compressed mass. He is going to smash through Hannibal's center by sheer weight. It is exactly what Hannibal wants. The battle opens mid-morning. Hannibal's heavy cavalry immediately routs the Roman horsemen on the right flank, then, rather than pursuing, swings behind the entire Roman army to hit the Italian allied cavalry on the opposite side. At the center, the Roman mass pushes forward. Hannibal's Gauls and Spanish give ground, slowly, deliberately, maintaining formation. The convex bulge inverts. Romans pour into the depression, pressing harder, sensing breakthrough. The formation compresses. Men crowd together, losing room to use their weapons. Hannibal is not retreating. He is pulling Rome into a kill zone. The signal. African veterans on both flanks pivot inward simultaneously. Hasdrubal's cavalry crashes into the Roman rear. The Roman army, 80,000 men, is completely surrounded. What follows is not a battle. It is 6 hours of industrial destruction. Men cannot run, cannot form, cannot maneuver. Roman soldiers die not only from wounds but from suffocation, crushed so tightly they cannot raise their arms. The ancient sources describe the ground becoming impassable from bodies, not terrain. Between 47,000 and 70,000 Romans die, 80 senators, over 200 equestrians. In a single morning, Hannibal kills more Romans than died in the entire First Punic War. Rome's Senate's response is one of the most remarkable moments in any government's history. No public mourning, no lamentation, no negotiation. The war continues. And then, Hannibal does not march on Rome. His cavalry commander Hannibal reportedly told him, "You know how to gain a victory, Hannibal. You do not know how to use one." Rome was in shock. Its walls were lightly defended. 4 days' march. Even camping outside the gates might have been enough to shatter the alliance network. The practical arguments against marching are real. No siege equipment, a tired army, fragile supply lines. But Hannibal had crossed the Alps. Practical obstacles had never stopped him before. The deeper truth may be that Hannibal's strategy was always political theater, proving Rome's weakness, rather than physically destroying Rome. He may have genuinely believed Cannae would cause the alliance network to collapse without him needing to march. He was wrong. Capua defected, several Samnite tribes swensed. Philip V of Macedon allied with Carthage but sent no actual help. The Greek cities in the south wavered. The Latin colonies held. The core of the network held. And Rome, using the strategy Fabius had been mocked for, began the slow, painful work of rebuilding. Avoid battle, raid supply lines, starve Hannibal of the decisive engagement he needed to maintain momentum. Hannibal spent 12 more years marching through Italy, winning tactically, watching his army shrink, waiting for reinforcements that never came. While Hannibal won battles he couldn't convert into victory, Rome was adapting. Scipio took command in Spain in 10 BC. In 4 years he destroyed Carthaginian power in Iberia entirely. The decisive strike was his assault on Carthago Nova, the main Carthaginian base considered impregnable on its peninsula. Scipio's intelligence had found that the lagoon on one side was shallow enough to wade at low tide. He launched a frontal assault on the main gate to draw all defenders there, then sent a second force wading through the lagoon to scale the undefended walls. The city fell in a day. Stored treasure, hostages, weapons, supplies, all suddenly Roman. Spain fell within 3 years. Scipio's next move was the strategic stroke that ended the war. Take the war to Africa, land in Tunisia, threaten Carthage itself, force Hannibal home. The Senate was terrified. Fabius argued against it. Scipio had the political will and the absolute certainty of a man who knew exactly what he was doing. He landed in Africa in 204 BC with 35,000 men. Carthage panicked. All remaining forces in Italy were recalled, including Hannibal. Hannibal Barca, undefeated in 15 years of Italian campaigning, was withdrawing, not because he had been beaten, because Rome had found the lever that moved him. He sailed from Croton in 203 BC,
taking his veterans but leaving behind thousands who had built lives in Italy over 15 years and could not be compelled to leave. He landed in Africa. The final confrontation was at hand. The Battle of Zama, October 19, 202 BC, a plain 5 days' march southwest of Carthage. The two greatest commanders of their age face each other for the first and last time. The night before the battle they meet. Hannibal reportedly offers peace. Let Carthage keep Africa, let Rome keep everything else. Scipio refuses. He holds the advantage and he knows it. After 15 years, Rome will accept nothing less than complete dominance. At Zama, Hannibal's position is weakened. His cavalry is inferior to what it had been in Italy. His army includes raw recruits and mercenaries of questionable loyalty. His veterans from the Alpine crossing are older, fewer, and aware that time has turned against them. He opens with 80 war elephants, a reasonable weapon against most opponents. Scipio had prepared. He arranged his maniples in columns rather than checkerboard, opening clear lanes. When the elephants charged, the Romans simply parted. The animals passed through harmlessly. Some turned back into Hannibal's own cavalry. Then Scipio's Numidian cavalry, commanded by Massinissa, a Numidian king whose defection from Carthage was itself a product of Roman diplomacy, routed Hannibal's horsemen from the field and came back. That was the reversal. At Cannae, Hannibal's cavalry had been the closing jaw of the encirclement. At Zama, Scipio's cavalry performed the exact same function. When the infantry battle reached its critical moment, Massinissa's horsemen returned, hit the Carthaginian rear, and the encirclement closed on Hannibal's army. Between 20,000 and 25,000 Carthaginians died. Hannibal escaped. The war was over. The Treaty of 201 BC stripped Carthage of everything. 10 warships, no wars without Roman permission, 10,000 talents of silver over 50 years, Spain, the islands, all African territory outside a narrow coastal strip. Alive, but declawed. Hannibal stayed long enough to serve as Carthage's chief civil magistrate, reorganizing its finances so effectively that Carthage began paying its indemnity as its schedule. This alarmed Rome more than his military campaigns had. A financially recovering Carthage was a threat. Under Roman pressure, Hannibal was forced to flee, first to Syria, then to Bithynia. Rome followed him everywhere, demanding extradition. In 183 BC, rather than be handed over, he took poison. He was 64 years old. He had never been captured. In a haunting historical coincidence, Scipio Africanus also died in 183 BC, estranged from his Senate, facing political persecution from rivals who feared his fame. His tomb reportedly bore the inscription, "Ungrateful homeland, you shall not even have my bones." 2 giants, same year, both destroyed not by each other, but by the political machinery of their own civilizations. The critical mistake of the Punic Wars is usually framed as Hannibal's failure to march on Rome after Cannae, but this locates a single tactical moment as the history, while missing the deeper failure beneath it. Hannibal's fundamental miscalculation was his strategy of victory itself. He believed destroying enough Roman armies would cause Rome's Italian allies to defect, isolating Rome and forcing negotiation. This assumed Rome's allies valued autonomy over long-term survival calculations. It assumed Rome would behave the way Carthage behaved, where loyalty was purchased and commercial logic governed decisions. Rome didn't just offer its allies military protection. It offered identity, legal standing, economic integration, and the promise of eventual citizenship. These bonds didn't snap under military pressure. Shared adversity strengthened them. Hannibal's strategy required a Rome that would behave like Carthage. It found a Rome that behaved like Rome. Carthage's political failure compounded everything. The Senate's refusal to fully back the Barca campaign denied Hannibal the reinforcements he needed at every critical moment. His brother Hasdrubal led a force across the Alps in 217 BC to link up with him, but the Roman general Gaius Claudius Nero intercepted Hasdrubal's dispatches, force-marched his army in secret, and destroyed Hasdrubal at the Battle of the Matirus. Hasdrubal died in the fighting. The first Hannibal knew of it was when Roman soldiers threw his brother's severed head into his camp. That, some historians argue, was when Hannibal knew the war was lost. He retreated south and waited, increasingly irrelevant, as Scipio's African campaign concluded without him. The Third Punic War was not Carthaginian provocation. It was a Roman choice. After Zama, Carthage did everything the treaty required. It paid its indemnity, it stayed within its borders, it rebuilt so successfully it could pay off the 50-year debt in a single lump sum. Rome was alarmed. Cato the Elder ended every Senate speech on any topic with the words, "Carthage must be destroyed." The fear wasn't rational militarily. Carthage had no army capable to threaten Rome. But the psychological wound of Hannibal's invasion had never closed. Rome escalated its demands until no concession was sufficient. Carthage surrendered its weapons, its hostages, offered its population a coastal relocation. Rome's terms kept climbing. Eventually Carthage had nothing left to offer but resistance. It fought, deliberately disarmed against the full force of Rome. It held out for 3 years. The final assault in 146 BC was led by Scipio Aemilianus, the adopted grandson of Scipio Africanus. He burned the city to the ground. He sold the survivors' booty 7,000 and 100,000 people into slavery. Ancient sources described him weeping as he watched it burning, quoting Homer on the fall of Troy. Carthage ceased to exist as a civilization in 146 BC, not defeated, erased. The Punic Wars made Rome an empire before Rome understood what it was becoming. Dominance over the western Mediterranean led almost inevitably to the eastern. Within 60 years of Carthaginians' destruction, Rome had absorbed Greece, Asia Minor, and the eastern African coast. The Republic had become a world power governing territories its institutions were never designed to manage. The transformation accelerated everything that followed. Professional armies replaced seasonal citizen levies and gave temporals unprecedented political power. Economic reorganization devastated the small farmer class that had been the Republic's backbone, as wealthy Romans bought out land while veterans fought abroad, working it with the enormous slave populations the Punic Wars had generated. Political institutions designed for a city-state buckled under the weight of empire. The result, a century after Cannae, was civil war. Caesar, Augustus, the Principate. Hannibal's shadow fell over all of it. Every major Roman general for the next 2 centuries studied Cannae. Julius Caesar's Encirclement at Alesia in 52 BC carries its geometry. The concept of double envelopment became standard doctrine, endlessly refined, endlessly attempted, endlessly feared. In the 20th century, Alfred von Schlieffen built the entire German opening campaign of World War I around Cannae's template, a great wheeling movement to envelop the French army from the flank and rear. It failed, partly because modern armies were too large and communications too slow for such coordinates across that scale. But it failed attempting what Hannibal had executed 21 centuries earlier. The military innovations born from these wars, Rome's professional navy, the Corvus boarding bridge, systematic siege engineering, the flexible manipular legion, all became foundational to the Western military tradition. But the deepest lesson is something else entirely. The Punic Wars demonstrate with almost clinical precision that institutional resilience can outlast individual genius. Hannibal never lost a major engagement in the field. He inflicted on Rome the most catastrophic single-day military defeat in its history, and he lost the war. He lost because Rome was not an army. It was a system, political, institutional, demographic, that could absorb disasters that would have destroyed any other state, regenerate destroyed armies, adapt its tactics, and sustain its purpose across decades without losing coherence. Rome's Senate never seriously contemplated surrendering after Cannae. That decision, made in the worst possible moment, when every rational calculation argued for capitulation, was the real pivot point of the entire conflict. Not Trebia, not Trasimene, not Cannae itself. The decision by bloodied, terrified senators,
in the wreckage of their greatest defeat, to look at each other and say, "We continue." That decision saved Rome. That decision is why the world you live in today speaks Latin-derived languages, uses Roman law as the foundation of its legal systems, and builds government buildings that look like Roman temples. Carthage is gone, its language extinct, its gods unknown. Its history survives only in the records of the civilization that destroyed it. And on a plain near Cannae, under the August sun, in ground that has been farmed and forgotten for 2,000 years, the bones of 50,000 men who died in a morning lie scattered in the soil, the physical residue of a day that almost rewrote everything. History did not have to go the way it went. It chose Rome. Rome chose to let it. But the next time a civilization stands on the edge of annihilation, facing an opponent who seems invincible, facing a morning that looks like the last one, the question that matters is not whether the enemy is brilliant. The question is whether you decide to continue.